But the mindset around the food rules is what's scary, because then when we are not following what we believe might be a rule, we have shame and guilt. And everyone's individual, what feels great for your body. And as you know, everyone could walk around with a CGM and we would all have different reactions to different food. So we really need to also explore the bio-individuality of this and what works for you, what makes you feel stable, what keeps you going, what gives you the energy.
Welcome to the Type 1 and Midlife podcast. My name is Melissa Slem, a certified nutritional health coach and the founder and CEO of Abundant Health with Melissa, where I help women with type 1 diabetes to feel more empowered and live their best life despite their diagnosis. Each week, I will bring conversations and strategies from guest experts and my experience living with type 1 for over 40 years now. So if you're a woman ready to redefine how diabetes can look and feel for you, then the Type 1 and Midlife podcast is the show for you. In today's show, we welcome Kim Hynes, a great friend of mine. I'm so excited to welcome Kim here today. She is a certified and holistic health coach, and she helps women 40 plus give themselves permission to eat and lose weight intuitively and to feel more confident in their bodies, all without restrictive dieting. So she comes and shares her story and how her own unhealthy relationship with food really led her to this area. And we talk about how our mindset around food rules can be scary and shamed, and guilt can take over our freedom to eat, and how this impacts our diabetes care, how all this led her to help other women. We also tell you a little story about how we first met, and it was all around her curiosity watching me test my blood sugar. So stay tuned for that story. And the journey through the perimenopausal stages, we dive into that and how blood sugar and emotional eating is impacted by, again, our relationship with food. So today, Kim inspires us women managing type 1 to set fair expectations around food and how we get to enjoy what we eat. So help me welcome my guest, Kim, to the show. Just a reminder that nothing you hear on this Type 1 and Midlife podcast should be a substitute for professional medical advice. Please always consult your medical professional before changing your diet, insulin dosages, or healthcare plan. Hello and welcome. I'm so excited. I have a good friend going to sit here with me today and talk about health and what we can do better and think about and be more intuitively connected to. So Kim, I am excited you are here. And as I mentioned in our intro, Kim is a certified nutritional health coach whose goal is to help 40 plus women give themselves permission to eat, lose weight intuitively, and feel confident in their bodies. Happy to be here with you.
Hey, Melissa. Thank you, my friend. I'm very happy to be here. Every time we talk, we uncover all kinds of new things that we can help women with. So I'm happy to be here.
Mm-hmm. Well, why don't we start? And because I know we've known each other for 5-6 years now, and we have an interesting introduction, the way that we met. And the reason we're talking about this is because it's very blood sugar related. So if you want to share that quick story, just to give the audience an idea of, and we live in the same town. So Kim and I are definitely, we have a lot in common with what we do and who we help. And we're also very, very good friends. So just very, very blessed to have you in my life. So how is it that we met?
And I feel so blessed too. It's a God thing that we met each other, because it was in the gym and I saw Melissa testing her out of thought, either ketones or blood sugar. And at the time, I believe you were using a glucometer. And I was really curious. I saw this strip go in, and having come out of the nutritional health coaching school, we find out later that we both went to IIN, but I was very curious about all things health. So I got brave And I went up to Melissa and I asked her about it, but I also was looking at her thinking, this is a fit person. If there's a chance that she's testing her blood sugar, I want to know more. And when we got talking, we got into the conversation about diabetes. And I found out that Melissa is type 1 diabetic, and which is even more impressive because she's obviously managing it so well as I'm talking to her and listening to her. And when I asked her for her card and we exchanged information, we found out that we were doing the same thing. And as you know, there's a lot of different nutritional health coaches out there, but we all do something different. So finding out more about diabetes was exciting, but also finding a new friend in my space and in my town. It's hard to come by, to have somebody right there that you can get support from and talk to every day. We literally talk every day about all of these things.
Yes.
And as we have evolved, and Melissa has moved into the type 1 diabetes space, I've moved into intuitive eating, but we still share the core beliefs about health. So that's how we got started many years ago. And we are very, very good friends. And we also help each other a lot, women supporting women.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's funny. I remember coming home and telling my husband, Dave, and he looked at me funny because it was early on when I started coaching. And he's like, well, that's competition. You're talking your competition. I'm like, and I guess I think at the time I didn't really know how to respond to that question. Fast forward now, I realize that no, we need each other. There are so many women, people that need our help. There is no competition. It's just a beautiful thing. So here we are, many years later. We've done a lot together and grown our businesses, and we just continue to help women. So yes to all of that. So tell me, you just mentioned something about, you just talked about your area of coaching. Can kind of just, so the audience gets to know your story, because it's important, you know, I do this as well. Obviously type 1 is not something that I can necessarily hide or put on the back burner. It's something I have to carry around every day, literally. And so I do have an opportunity to share my story, because it's a continued story. So tell me about you and why it is that this is what you are doing. And these are the women that you know that you can serve the best.
Yes, thank you. So it goes way, way back. And I'll be really honest with you. I didn't really understand this till just a few years ago. And that's why my business has evolved in helping women. And because I started with just straight up health coaching, I started up with just, you know, sharing how we should eat, the food and the exercise. I really didn't get into the entire part of our lives, including the emotional side of things. And it starts so far back. When my mom went back to work, my mom was home for a number of years with us. And it was probably, I was 8 or 10 years old. And back then, you could be that young and stay home with a younger sibling. Nobody really thought anything about it. You always had your neighbors nearby.
So
but
true.
I noticed when I look back, I remember that that's when my kind of binge eating started on sugar, because I would get into the chocolate chips that my mom would use for baking. I'd get into the Country Time lemonade. I'd be searching for something. And I think part of it was the emotional feelings of being responsible for my brother, my mom being gone, kind of learning to be on my own. Mm-hmm. And it really, we had a very healthy upbringing. So we had a very moderate way of eating. Back then, McDonald's was a treat. Pizza night was a treat. We didn't indulge. We had, dessert once in a while. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like there was something going on in my family. But I do remember going to college and really overdoing it. No one would tell me that I couldn't go get a Reese's peanut butter cup from the convenience store every day if I wanted to do that. But I would also be a secret eater. I would walk into my apartment in college and I would be putting my McDonald's bag in my backpack. I knew somehow it wasn't right. And I was feeling the shame and the guilt around it. And I would go to my room and I would eat my food in my room in secret. So there was clearly some emotional things going on. And I look back, and my first year of college was absolutely challenging. My parents divorced that year. One of my favorite grandpas had passed away that year. And now I can make all the connections, and I want to help people with that, because now we also have so much more stress that is not just trauma or not just actual events that happen. We have daily stress that is happening. So this is how I came into really looking at intuitive eating, because I also tried to diet. Literally for 20 years, I was on some version of a diet or restrictive behavior, and I would just binge and restrict. And I was able to hide the binging because I was a marathon runner for a while. And with all of that leading up, I realized that the only way that I could handle enjoying my food, eating in a moderate way, was to really use intuitive eating. And I decided I have to share this with women. But we'll get into this more. But intuitive eating is not just about the food, but that's where I started. And then we incorporate all the other things that we learned in our nutritional health coaching school.
Our clients parallel in a lot of sense, which is why you're here, and I didn't mention this at the very beginning, but no, Kim does not live with type 1 diabetes. And going forward in this show, there will be some guests on here that do not live with type 1, but what they're expert in and what they're able to share, and their stories do tie back to those of us women living with type 1. So that is why you're here. And eating is something we all need to do. That is a fact. It's legal. It's acceptable. But there's naturally emotions attached, and we should enjoy the event that we're eating, that we are at, whether that's a date night or if it's a social event. So I think it's hard, again, living with diabetes or not, is to separate how we're feeling around what we're eating, and to not put that, to put those boundaries there. Now, with diabetes, this can really relate to what, whenever a woman is diagnosed. I was a teenager diagnosed, so I honestly don't remember a different relationship with food. Obviously when I was growing up, I was active. I ate like a normal teenager. So I don't really have anything to compare that to. So I always feel like I've been eating to serve my blood sugar and my diabetes for, really a lifetime now. But there is that segment of the population, women, men even as well. This conversation does not leave men out, but just that, when we are diagnosed, it's that relationship with what food is now. Carbohydrates is the big thing. There's those boundaries that we can sometimes put up around it. And I think it all has to do with your surroundings, your environment, your doctor, what they're teaching or trying to, I'm not going to say push, but suggest for those of us that are diagnosed. And then there's so much to think about. So then you have to unpack what you were used to doing when it came to food and foods that you chose. And now you've got to choose food around trying to keep yourself healthy, blood sugars balanced, and all of that. So, wow, there's a lot, can you speak on that as far as how that could really be, for women with diabetes? How can we kind of let go, or can we, those rules or boundaries?
I think that's a really great point, because with intuitive eating, there is this myth that we are going to just go crazy. We're going to start with donuts and, have chocolate and end with, a bunch of bread in the day. We're just going to eat whatever we feel like. But what really intuitive eating is about, it's listening to your body, because every diet, every food rule, everything out there is telling you, don't listen to your body. Do this one size fits all plan and you'll be fine. You're going to lose all this weight and you're going to look great. You're going to be happy. Everything's going to be great. But what really, even with having diabetes, the food rules are important. We still have to have healthy habits, but learning to listen so that we are not over restricting, because over restricting doesn't just mean eating perfectly. It means having the mental part of it too, because sometimes it can be overwhelming. When you get diagnosed, you are overwhelmed with all the things that you're supposed to do. And what I often recommend, even to my own clients, whether they are diabetic or not, is let's start with, and I know you do this too, Melissa, let's start with adding in things that we know are really going to be helpful. We're not going to take away everything yet. We're going to figure out what is most helpful. And we both believe in your balanced plate, starting with that protein in those veggies. And when we add in something else, whether it's the carb, whether it's a sweet at the end, having combinations, knowing that you're not depriving yourself, knowing that you don't have to take everything out, but making sure you have good combinations that make you feel full and satisfied and that you're enjoying your food. And you and I talk about this so much. Food rules, if you think about it, it takes away the opportunity to explore beautiful, wonderful food. And you have such amazing recipes. And we love to explore food and all of the options, not just chicken and broccoli, chicken and broccoli. We see these diets out there and it's all the same thing, ground turkey and cauliflower. And there are so many different options that we can have. But the mindset around the food rules is what's scary, because then when we are not following what we believe might be a rule, we have shame and guilt. And everyone's individual, what feels great for your body. And as you know, everyone could walk around with a CGM and we would all have different reactions to different food. So we really need to, we really need to also explore the bio-individuality of this and what works for you, what makes you feel stable, what keeps you going, what gives you the energy, instead of making, this is what I tell my clients, instead of having the diet, I won't name a diet. I know everyone out there can name at least 1 to 3 diets that they've heard of. I'm going to call mine the Kim diet. You're going to call yours the Melissa diet. What works for you. And you're going to know if you're not feeling well, you don't have energy, your skin's not looking good, your blood sugar's all over the place, and you're not maybe maintaining a really nice set weight that makes you feel good, then you know that your food rules, if that's what you are doing, need to change.
And, even in the diabetes space, these diets are seeping in as well. There's a lot of opportunities out there, whether it's the high fat, the low carb, the high carb, the low fat, the keto diet, promising to give us better blood sugar control. And, and that is such a perfect example. And we've got to be individual with what we do. It has to be, like you say, the Kim diet, the Melissa diet. And that changes over time too, with or without diabetes, because, we're ever changing, hormones, lifestyle, activity. There's so many layers to it, right? Food rules, diets, they do seep into the diabetes community as well. And, this brings up a topic. I have a group coaching program going on right now. And just this past week, this topic came up. This is a newly diagnosed lady, and she's trying to figure out what she's allowed to eat and what is normal. And it was such an awesome conversation. And there was a few of us in the room, and we just let her just kind of share, because she's only a year into her diagnosis. She eats amazing, healthy foods, and she loves to cook. So she's very in tune with food. She's learning about the carb grams and all of that, the balance plate, but she's still trying, and she considers herself, that she's eating larger portions. And there's 2 sides to this. So she's got this inner voice telling her, well, maybe even if it is great food, even if it is an amazing, great salad full of vegetables, is it still too much? And it was nice to hear her story. It was nice for her to share that that's where she is. And, how did you respond to that? And then I'm going to share, how the group discussion went, and, what she walked away with when we were done covering that topic.
That is an excellent example of us not listening to ourselves, because we are basing our portions even on what other people, we're outsourcing basically our information on
Yeah.
what we feel like our body should have. And as an intuitive eating coach, this is where I go with this. And I know you've got amazing information for people too. So what I ask people to do is when they sit down to eat, there's a whole thing, and you do what you can, because not everybody remembers every step of this. But first, by having gratitude over the food that you have in front of you, because it is this source of life for us. This is pleasure. This is something that is going in, fueling our bodies. And I don't believe that food is just fuel. That's just the gratitude that I have and where my food comes from. But then also, when we start eating, to really take our time when possible. I know that we have busy schedules, so I'm not fooling myself by thinking everybody has the time to just sit and savor every bite. But when we do, and we savor the food and we love it, and we have the texture and the taste and the smell, and we're having it, our body is so absolutely wonderful. Our bodies, our God-given bodies, know when we are full. And when we feel full, and sometimes we accidentally overdo it. That's part of what I do with people, is saying, hey, it's okay. Sometimes we get excited, it tastes good, or we're mindless, or our brain is somewhere else, or we're on the phone. But when you really feel full, I ask people to also put their hand on their belly and say, I am satisfied. And if you are satisfied and you are not overly feeling uncomfortable, that is a great amount of food. And we don't have to outsource with, there's so many people, and I understand why some people do it, but weighing everything or putting it into the little containers or whatever they do, tracking it, and they're not listening to their bodies. And so if that portion feels good for you and you're not uncomfortable, then it's probably a really good portion.
Yeah. Perfect example. And I gave her similar advice. I kind of drilled down more into the blood sugar area of it too, because she's got great blood sugar control. She's able to reach that. So she doesn't have a lot of variables that she's really trying to, I'll say, correct or fix, but it really is an emotional attachment to the amount of food that she's eating, beautiful, healthy food, and just giving herself permission to do that. And that is one of the things that we kind of tapped into as well, is the fact that she feels like she's eating too fast. Because I know that for everybody, this is a great practice for all of us. But it's a good practice, especially when you are like this client who is trying to figure out what is good for her at that particular time of the day, what's going to feel good, and ultimately what is her blood sugar goals, And I always try to kind of look back. This is the way I kind of look at food as well, just myself living with type 1, is, you start with the blood sugar. Obviously, it's your blood sugar number before you eat, and whether or not you have to take an insulin dose for that meal. Again, it's carb counting. And then I'm always looking ahead to see, okay, how do I want to feel afterwards? And this is all while I'm trying to slow down myself, because I myself can be a fast eater. So it is, like you say, just enjoying every bite, being appreciative of it, and knowing that it's going to fuel us both energy wise, mood wise, for those, next 3, 4, 5 hours, whenever that next meal is. So I think it really gave her a better idea of, it's okay. Listen to your body. And then, the other part of this was the judgment. And I know I want to talk about this with you too, is what other people are saying about what's on our plate. And this is such a huge topic in the diabetes community, because people that don't generally understand what we're allowed to eat — I cannot stand the word allowed, but but you can get it. It's that permission. You get the looks when you're out, whether you're over somebody's house for dinner or you're out to dinner with somebody. And it's just, in all fairness, people don't generally understand what our eating plan is all about when we're trying to,
keep our blood sugar in balance. So I give them that, and I understand that. And I always think of it as it's an opportunity to educate and just to kind of, for them to get more in tune with, really what our diet is made up of. But to let go of that, that rule too, like in public. So, and sometimes it's even people in our own home that are judging, it's that, should you have that? Is that too much? It's that back and forth judgment. And if this goes with diabetes or not, I know this topic just kind of crosses over both lanes. But it does, I think all in all, I think it's just, it's an opportunity for us to do what's best for us, and to listen to our body, like you say, and, just have some peace with what our choices are.
I think that's really important, because judgment and food shaming can come from other people in your mind. And it can also come inside you based on whatever your past is, because a lot of times when we get diagnosed with things, we also, not meaning to, and we know it's not always true, but we blame ourselves. What could I have done better? And the food shaming is really interesting, because we feel like we are under a microscope when we're trying to make changes in our life. And when people do make comments, it's really important to stay on your own path, do what you need to do. And also, I guess that helps us let go of judging other people, because everyone is on their path and they're in a different chapter, and they're ready or they're not ready. So if you're a listener and you're just starting to get ready to go through this, you have your own path, and it doesn't always happen overnight. And that's why the diets don't work. That's why the rules don't always work, unless you absolutely have to make a change because your health is so deteriorating because of it. Yeah. But I love that you brought up judgment, because it happens not just from what you think other people are judging you on, but also based on your own inner voice that you can change. You are doing the best you can at any given time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's so many layers to our, just our emotional health living with diabetes. So yeah, it really is being in tune with ourselves and going easy on ourselves, having some, just some self-love, and that's what I think is so important about our community too. We have a strong community. I'm finding more and more, which is fortunate people living with diabetes. And I think, that is the missing thing too. At least it was for me when I was much younger, is feeling very isolated with all these decisions we have to make, including food. So that's something that I had to kind of get to. So what about, I want to share something else too, because you and I were on a trip. We went on a business trip together down in Fort Myers about 4 years ago. And you had a chance. We went out, you share the story, because you could probably tell it better than I, because I want to hear your reaction, because you and to this day, you do have a glucometer. So you do have an opportunity. And I know it's something that you test. And there's such a craze right now too, with many different people that are wanting to get more in tune with their metabolic health, which I think is an amazing thing, because we learn a lot about, and this is, again, it's not a judgment thing. It's just information, and to learn about what food, what activity, stress, all those things that affect our blood sugar, and just to find those triggers, those things that are, like you mentioned before, the certain foods that we know that we're going to react to, whereas the, friend next to you may not. But share the story about that night out that we had.
I remember it so well. Oh my goodness. I've used this as an example to people because it was the first time that I had ever tested my blood sugar. So I will tell you this story, and it got me hooked on understanding this. And, you would think with Melissa being a diabetes health coach, I would know more than I do about myself, but I've constantly been learning from her over the last 6 years. But we went out to dinner that night after the conference, which was amazing. Our energy was up. There was probably a little bit of stress with traveling also. And we were on quite the schedule. I also remember that day, I don't think we were able to eat very well. I think they gave us like a box lunch. And I remember not feeling 100% because it was these little sandwiches or something. And we went out to a restaurant and we had a really healthy meal, actually. And I believe it was like bison burgers and avocado. And the way that Melissa and I eat, when we travel together, and we've traveled a couple times together, it's great because we do eat the same. We have the same schedule of sleeping. We work out together. So we ate a wonderful meal, but we thought, well, let's just have fun. We're going to have a glass of wine. And back then I was still drinking. We're going to have a glass of wine and we're going to indulge in splitting a dessert. And we got back to the Airbnb and I was like sweating. I was feeling hot. I was kind of sweaty and I felt really funky. And Melissa, genius, decided to help me learn to test my blood sugar. And I'd never used a glucometer before. I have clients that have used them. And my blood sugar had shot up. I don't know if you remember the number. It was over 200.
It was right in the 200 range. Yes.
Yeah. And it took a little while to bring it down, which was also surprising to me. And it was an eye-opening experience because what I remember is every time I ate like that, I would have a similar reaction, but I never put the pieces together. And that was a wonderful experience for me. And then when I came home, and actually, I think the glucometer I have is from you. And I have been testing on and off because what's interesting is we talk about people not reacting the same way. And so, for example, a banana and oatmeal will also send me over the edge, but my husband, Mike, can have that and doesn't have the same reaction. So I thought that was fascinating. So thank you, Melissa. You got me started really looking at that.
Yeah, that's such a good example. And then not only are you and Mike different, like we all are, but our reaction to food is so different. And yeah, this is something too, because I'm now on a CGM. I've been using a continuous glucose monitor for many years now. What a cool tool, right? But just to learn and to see it. And, this is another good example too. And I saw somebody else the other day mention this as well, is that nobody's blood sugar is a flat line. Okay, ever. Again, diabetes or not. Certain foods, and again, we all have insulin on board in theory. With us, it's manually, because we're having to inject, to keep that balance in. But again, we're all walking around with certain foods at certain times of the day are going to impact our glucose, sometimes more sharp than others. And again, depending on our reaction and our response to that number, it might take a little bit longer to come down. But, I think that's another example of just realizing it, say, hey, this is life. Food is going to serve us on so many levels, and we need to appreciate it. And we're doing the best we can. And women with diabetes really, really need to remember that. And we're not perfect. Nobody is perfect. And, I love the fact that you shared your physical reaction to that, because I think that is so important because it goes back to just being in tune with our body and understanding and food is obviously what we're talking about today, but other things that go on throughout our day that can trigger how we feel, both emotionally, physically, spiritually, all those things. It's almost like that outside agent that just kind of knocks and gives us these signs. So it's good, right? Symptoms are good.
It was incredible. And what's really great about having those symptoms and understanding what it was, and also you helping me constantly understand what's happening to our bodies when we're constantly spiking our blood sugar, it helps me because I am an emotional eater. It helps me make those choices where I take the emotion out. Physically how you're going to feel if you pay attention to that. And that helps me change the way I eat. Am I going to give up dessert? No, I did give up alcohol, but that's a whole nother reason. And we'll talk about, the hormones and whatnot later. But the physical feelings, when you can take the emotion out a little bit, it makes you realize I have other choices that are satisfying, that are not going to make me feel physically ill when I eat them.
Right. Yes. Yeah. There's other ways. And I know that's part of how you coach as well, is just looking at the full picture. It's that circle of life that we're both used to hearing about, or to coaching and trying to live ourselves. Trying to fill all those other buckets in our life that are going to make us less eager or pushing us to the bag of chips, right?
Exactly.
So I know and you know what, we're human, and food is amazing. We love food, and food does so many wonderful things, and it's nice to have great memories around our food too, and to give ourselves some love around it. Let's talk about hormones, because this is definitely something that happens, because both you and I work with midlife women. So generally speaking, that's age 40 and up. And so what happens with our hormones as they shift? And you and I each have a story about how that's happened, where, and again, whether or not it's blood sugar impact or not. But I have another interesting way to tie this into. Once I hear your story, I'm going to share a little bit more about my story, and it doesn't matter whether you are type 1, type 2, or have really good metabolic health up until perimenopause. It's amazing what happens when this stage of life does hit. So tell me your your journey with that.
Well, this is always fun to talk about, because we know that so many women go through the perimenopausal stages, but I'm going to be really honest with you. When I was really going through the perimenopausal stages, which is premenopause, I did not know for quite a while. I just thought there were a lot of things happening with me that maybe I could control better. And what we realize after the fact, of course, is that estrogen and progesterone are just dropping.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the weight gain around the middle, and I was just trying to work out more, eat better, the exact opposite of what I share with my clients, but I was trying to absolutely control this. And as if I could, my body was just going through the natural stages. But then I also had anxious thoughts, and that is a true menopause symptom. And it was causing a little more emotional eating. A lot of my clients go through exactly what we went through. But then I also was I was stressed out. I wasn't sleeping well. And we know that there's so many pockets of our health that are just not food and exercise. Sleep is so important. And when you're not sleeping, your body's not feeling its best, and you're not making good decisions. And everything seems so much more catastrophic during that time. But what I did notice was I was way more sensitive with my blood sugar. Mm-hmm. And there's no judgment when I say this to anyone who drinks alcohol, but that was part of my journey to letting go of alcohol. I was realizing that metabolically, I was not doing well with it. My blood sugar was not doing well. And then emotional eating wise, I was eating more when I drank alcohol. I was even more away from tuning in with my body. Mm-hmm. So I went through a lot to understand it. Now, yes, this is again, no judgment. Everyone has to do what they need to do. But I did explore hormone therapy replacement, the replacement of hormones, HRT. And I did explore that. And then when I was able to look at that, I was also able to get more clear on getting back to those healthier habits and eating and doing the things for my body that were much more beneficial. Because when we are going through it, it's so confusing. And it's so nice now that we are all connected with people who have given us information. Women are connected. I got to connect with you and be really honest, because it was a hard time to go through, and you were a great support during that time. So I'd love to hear your story too.
Yeah. We were there. We were there in it, weren't we? Right at the same time. Kim and I are very close to the same age. So we went through that stage at the very same time. And yeah, just like you said, estrogen drops. And guess what happens when our estrogen drops? And this happens when you're in your reproductive years as well. So this is a very key tool to use for women. And this is something I didn't even know in my reproductive years. So it just goes to show you, I continue to learn, and doctors did not tell me this. This was not part of the conversation when I went to a doctor visit, that I had all these fluctuations in my insulin sensitivity throughout my cycle. I never connected that. Now I was forced to connect it because, like you, I was having symptoms and my insulin sensitivity. So that basically is saying that the insulin I was taking was no longer working as well as it always had been. So your estrogen's dropping, your insulin sensitivity is dropping, so your insulin dose is rising. So guess what all that does, ladies? It can put weight on, and it did. And Kim and I are very in tune with our routine, our lifestyle. So when suddenly you've got 8-10 pounds around the middle, and again, this is not a judgment thing. This is just us talking, sharing how we felt. And this was an emotional thing too, because I was not the happiest person. I was crankier. My fuse was shorter. Again, this was what was going on. Our bodies were changing. Those hormones were not in balance anymore. And that was the reaction. And again, my eating changed as well. That was where I was a little bit more, I was going for the crackers and cheese a lot more. I was drinking a little bit more wine at night. Actually, this was during the COVID virus too. So that was going around. So there was more of all of that with a lot of people. So that, that just kind of shifted everybody's lifestyle. So the timing of it was not good. But understanding now we can look back and say, wow, we're so lucky that we got the tests done. We found out what was going on. And now I am also on hormone replacement therapy. And that has just made a big difference. And again, this is something that, we encourage you to talk to your doctor about. We don't promote any of this, but we definitely can share our journey has been a success, making that choice for us. And, something else, I had a few other vitamins that just tanked, that just went into vitamin D, my Bs, my iron. Is so interesting, ladies. Definitely get with your doctor, get those tests done, find out, get the facts, get the information so that you can really figure out what's going on with your body. And then when you tie that into type 1 diabetes, we've got the insulin, which is another hormone that we need to keep in balance, and all the hormones work together. So yeah, I know that was a long spiel about that, but I'm just so passionate about it. And that's really why I am working with this space of women, and, because I've been there, I've done it, and I'm here to help you. So yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned the hormones, because the other thing that you and I talked about a lot was cortisol. Because when you're not feeling well, cortisol is always spiking, which we know is connected to blood sugar. And sure, that was a very stressful time physically and mentally. So just knowing that, though, you can employ a lot of stress reduction techniques.
There you go. Again, it's being in tune with your body. So, we started off talking about being in tune with what's on our plate, which is so important, but it all does come back with our life, how we're feeling, and our energy and our mood and those magical hormones. It's all connected. So what do you think are fair expectations for women when it comes to—
Great question.
Yeah. So what, yeah. And again, with or without, we are talking to a diabetes audience. I hope some other listeners, that follow you as well are here listening to this conversation to continue to learn from what you do. But with or without blood sugar, because we all have blood sugar. Again, with or without a diagnosis, you still want to be controlling that blood sugar and, to keep that in a good balance so that you feel good. So what kind of fair expectations can we expect from ourselves?
So I'm coming from, again, the intuitive eating, emotional eating space, but I think very fair expectations are starting with, we know what food is good for us. And there are certain people that I work with that we have to talk about processed and packaged food so they understand what is in there, what's happening to their bodies. But for the most part, people come in and they say, I know that I could use some more protein. I know that I need to eat more fruits and vegetables. But I think a fair expectation is starting with that place and adding it in, as opposed to, you and I both crowd out, as opposed to taking out. And it depends on how extreme someone's situation is, obviously. And when we add in these really good things, we add in the walking, that helps stabilize blood sugar. We add in good food. Just adding a vegetable to one more meal a day is not as hard as saying, I'm not going to have that little piece of chocolate at night. Adding in a 10-minute walk, if you're not up to walking for very long just yet, just doing to the mailbox and back, and then to the end of the block and back. Walking is also a great way of processing your day and bringing down the stress and that cortisol, because again, everything is related. Nothing is not intertwined here. That was kind of a double negative, but I think you get the idea. But expectations of drinking more water, just very fair ways for yourself to feel like you're not being restrictive, but adding in the small things and then picking one thing that will reduce your stress. So if you're not a meditator, I get that. It's hard to settle in. It's hard to let thoughts go. There's also meditation where you focus on something so that you're not having to do that. There's tapping. Melissa and I have done tapping together in her group. There is all kinds of different techniques, whether you're having a morning routine to do devotions, get connected to God, whatever works for you. Setting an alarm, if you're not a person that can remember to do these things, to breathe, to pray, to take a break, set an alarm and do that at least 3 times a day so that you're not at the end of the day eating everything in sight and not feeling well, because it's a process. We sometimes just hold off until the end of the day and then we just let it all go because we're not working, the day's over, we're escaping, or we are rewarding, basically. So those to me seem like more doable steps than just saying, I'm going to quit sugar and everything's going to be fine and it's all good. I'm not going to have any carbs. Everything's going to be good.
Yeah.
Add in the things that you know that you can do. And the funny thing is, our brain is amazing. When you have those wins, you have to celebrate them, as small as they are. If you celebrate them, we have neuroplasticity. Our brain can rewire and know that we're on the right track and start pushing away that shame and guilt and look at it. This is how I want other people to look at their food and look at their lifestyle and their health. I want everyone to look at themselves from the outside, like curious, observing, instead of criticizing, see over see, curiosity over criticism. And that's just a way to look at, hey, I have all these things, but let me pick one at a time.
Yeah. And you know, that is how we approach our coaching too. We start off with those baby steps and celebrating the small wins. And you know, that same snowball effect that it's like when we were just talking about with the hormones, I feel like it can get out of control. That can be worked in a very positive way when we start with these easy things, the low-hanging fruit, and we build on it. And you see how strong and resilient you are, especially living with diabetes. It is a disease we cannot take a day off from, and we must celebrate how strong we are, and to use food to our advantage, not to our disadvantage. It is there for us. So what inspires you and gives you hope? And could you just share some beautiful words of wisdom to leave us with, but for our audience, as far as just hope. So what fills your heart with hope when you continue to help women?
I think one thing that is so amazing, we both agree that we have these God-given bodies and we are on a path, and everyone is on the path that they're supposed to be on. So if you got diagnosed, the hope that I have for you is that instead of looking at it as something that is horrible, knowing that you are in the right place at this time and you're learning this for a reason. And Melissa's here for you because this happened when it happened, and it's not always our timing and it's not always our choice. And when we look at it as there's a reason behind it and that it is a faith-filled reason, I think it gives us hope that we can also know that there are resources, there are people like Melissa, there's people like me, there are people here that are going to help you get through this. And this connection is not just a coincidence.
Oh,
It's here
so
for a reason.
nice. It sure
Yeah.
is. Yeah. We need each other. And Kim and I started this hour talking about how we were connected and just how beautiful our relationship is and that friendship. And we were brought together for a reason, just like this community is brought together, because we can't do diabetes alone. Nope, we shouldn't have to, and you don't have to. So I'm just so happy to talk with you today. And I hope the audience heard some things that spoke to them directly. And tell us how we, the audience, can connect with you and your website. And if you have maybe something free that they can come home with to stay connected with you.
And thank you, Melissa. I love talking to you about all of this. Yes, you can find me. I am mostly on Instagram, even though I'm on all the platforms. I have the same handle at Kim Hynes Health. And I do have a website, www.kimhynes.com. Very creative, huh? And I also, if you go out to my Instagram, in the bio, I have a link for, we talked a lot about stress and cortisol today.
Mm-hmm.
And stress eating, the root cause is really the stress. So I have 10 tips that you can use, just small daily things that are very doable, because that's what we talked about too, is taking the small steps in order to reduce that stress, so that at the end of the day, you're not finding yourself in the pantry and not feeling well, having the shame and guilt, spiking the blood sugar, ruining a really good dinner. So go ahead and grab that. And I just really appreciate being here. Thank you, Melissa.
Oh, it's perfect. That's the perfect thing for them to walk away with and take that next step. And we will link all of that in the show notes for you all. And again, thank you so much. And I'm going to invite you back because I think there's some other topics that we could dive into. So stay tuned. I am betting that Kim Hynes will be back and we can talk some more about this topic or something closely related to it, just to help serve all of you amazing women. Again, thank you, Kim, sharing your strategies with our listeners to eat more intuitively and to feel confident in their bodies. Again, thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Type 1 and Midlife podcast. Head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Thank you. And be sure to check us out at abundanthealthwithmelissa.com for our free resources. See you next week.